For anyone about to go into a job interview, my biggest piece of advice is don't misrepresent yourself, and if you don't know the answer to something, just say so. And whatever you do, don't do what I did and lie, because you just might get caught. You see, the reason you're looking at my Supra is I was once one of 2 final candidates for my dream job at Toyota. But long story short, I bombed the second round of the interview when I was caught doing exactly that. The reason I bring this up now is that this week I was just reminded of that event. You see, from last week's video where I talked about my failed attempt to be funny, by writing a blog post criticizing all my women engineering classmates by calling them ugly, I ended the video with this statement which just didn't quite sit right with me. And always think twice and consider the consequences of anything that you say about somebody else, because one day you could be working for them. It wasn't really what I wanted to say, and it's not the main reason you should be respectful and kind to people. But even though it didn't sit right with me, instead of going with my gut and just redoing it, I went the lazy route and just uploaded it anyway, the way it was. And this week I got this comment on the video that just confirmed for me the mistake that I made. That we should be kind to people not because we fear retribution, but because it's the right thing to do, to treat people with dignity and respect. And so I just spent the whole week reflecting on that, and especially how I had one shot to convey the correct message, but due to laziness I missed my chance, and now the wrong thing is permanently there. And the truth is, it wasn't the first time that I wasn't prepared to give it my all, and to be intentional with my efforts to not regret my decisions and my actions down the road. See, the biggest reason for that is, I grew up with such a privileged childhood that I often didn't know the criticality of seizing opportunities and the commitment and hard work necessary to be successful. As I shared in past videos, my parents did everything they could to help me get ahead in school, which included learning words and their meanings and learning how to spell at an early age, and practicing times tables and divisions before we were even taught multiplication in school. And so because of that, I was always considered the smart kid in elementary school. In fact, it was always me and another Asian friend that also had a bowl cut named Quang. And thinking back, it was always Quang and I finishing our assignments first, getting through our times tables first, getting all the school awards and special recognitions together.
And the first award is going to Quang Wang.
And in that respect, we were just similar. I remember us both doing speed reading and both finishing our times tables up through the 10s before anybody else was even on the 5s and the 6s. And so because of that, my parents knew Quang very well, oftentimes even dedicating time to film him in our home videos when we were at school. But the distinct thing that I remember is that for Quang and me, it always seemed like school was just so effortless. It never seemed like either of us really had to study, and when we did assignments, we never really even had to try very hard. Thinking back, I realized it was our parents preparing us ahead of time for what was to come. But back then I didn't realize that and just kind of took it for granted, just thinking that for Quang and me, it was just because we were naturally smart. And so this attitude of school being a breeze and never having to work hard or try to study, it just kind of lasted even through junior high. And so it wasn't until I got into high school that all of a sudden I got a huge dose of reality. You see, high school was the very first time that I was faced with the reality that I couldn't just rely on my so-called smarts and I couldn't just wing it anymore. I still remember my very first semester in high school was the very first time that I got anything lower than an A-. And in fact, I ended up with a C in some of my classes because I just had not developed the habit of needing to sit down and spend time to actually study something to retain it. And so the credit really goes to my girlfriend at the time, who actually had to sit me down and teach me and coach me how to study. It sounds stupid and basic, but I actually had to be taught how to study and how to prepare and how to actually put in effort to learn something. And it was a lesson for me that if I didn't give it my all and put effort into being prepared, that I would end up regretting not being ready. And so it really took a lot of effort to get out of that habit and mindset of just winging it when it came to academics, and to learn that I had to study and really apply myself if getting good grades was something that I really wanted. And so fortunately, it was late, but it was a lesson that I finally did manage to learn. Towards the end of high school, I did very well and managed to even take this habit and this mindset with me into college. And so from an academic standpoint, it was great. I learned how to apply myself and eventually even ended up getting a 4.0 in my master's program, which is why it is all the more bizarre to me now that when it came time to actually search for a job, the whole purpose behind going to school, that I couldn't take that lesson that I had learned to apply to academics and apply it to my job search. You see, because I had gotten good at academics again, I took it for granted again that I wouldn't really need to prepare in my job search, that somehow again I could just wing it and a career would just somehow fall into my lap. And so I still remember when I saw that posting for that Toyota position, powertrain development engineer, I honestly thought that I was going to be a shoo-in. And after the phone interview and first round interview, I was so convinced that I had it in the bag and that I didn't need to prepare because I could just wing it and make it through. They even told me beforehand that it was for a hybrid powertrain development position, as if telling me that I should study and be prepared for when the interview came. And so when that day came, I showed up at the Toyota campus in Torrance, and this was before they moved to Texas. I was greeted by the recruiter who I had also been interfacing with in the lobby, and she also introduced herself as my interpreter. She took me upstairs to a corporate office where I was surprised when she introduced me to 3 Japanese gentlemen who didn't speak any English at all. Initially, the interview went well. They were asking me why I was interested in working for Toyota, and I talked about my interest in cars, and even made sure to highlight my experiences with my Honda Prelude, how I modded it myself and played Fast and Furious with my friends, and it seemed like they were impressed. They were definitely happy that it seemed like I had a passion for cars, and sensing that I just continued to play up my interest, speaking through the interpreter, telling them that's exactly the reason why I went into mechanical engineering in the first place, continuing to play up and emphasize my knowledge and experience with them, which largely came from playing Fast and Furious with my friends in high school. I was getting really confident that this was a sealed deal until it happened. It started with the very first technical question. I had talked about my Honda Prelude and had mentioned that I had some experience with my friend's Honda Insight, which honestly was only limited to seeing it in the driveway. But latching onto that, they first asked what the difference was between Honda and Toyota's hybrid systems. When I failed to answer that, they started asking a series of questions in decreasing difficulty, eventually ending up asking the most basic questions about how an engine even works, to which I couldn't even answer. You see, I had played up my interest in cars, but the truth was I had done no research into how they actually worked, much less anything to do with hybrid systems. And so shortly after that, they let me go, and I could see on their faces that they were disappointed, and I got an email from the recruiter the next day telling me that I didn't get the position. These days, as I reflect on that story, I never want to be caught again in a situation where I wish that I could have taken something more seriously, or regret that I didn't do my best to make the most of a situation or opportunity given to me. Especially as it comes to mom's dementia, which continues to get worse, I want to make the most of each day, while at the same time preparing for the inevitable. Things that I've been talking to you guys about, like getting her end-of-life affairs in order, our family finances in order, and simply just making the most of each moment that I have left with her. These are all things that I don't want to just leave to chance, and I definitely don't want to just wing it to try to get by. So that's all I wanted to leave with you guys this week. In each moment and every situation, give it your all in whatever you do. You don't want to have to look back one day and wish that things had gone differently if you had just tried harder or cared more. And by putting your all into whatever you do, you can be assured that you did your best and left it all out there and made the most of every opportunity. So I was going to end the video here, but I just had to add this epilogue to expand on the conclusion that I just ended with. In an absolute stroke of irony, the very next semester after I got rejected from the Toyota job, I actually took a senior design class where I learned everything about hybrid vehicles that could have helped me answer every single one of the questions I was asked during that interview. And regarding the question as to all the different types of hybrid drivetrains, well, here it is. And regarding my friend Quang, ironically as well, years later, one of my closest friends that I ended up meeting, Don, who's actually the guy that many of you commented laying on the floor here during this workout, come to find out he's Quang's cousin, and he let me know that Quang was doing very well, and he's largely considered the crown jewel of his family, is now working in medicine. And so I just wanted to add that yes, even though we do want to try our best to make the most of every opportunity, that things may not always work out as we expect, and even if they don't, there are lessons to be learned, relationships to be built, and experiences to be had no matter what the outcome.